Gettysburg Church. This is Pastor Steve here with our Monday Minute for July the 6th, 2020. We just celebrated our independence this past weekend, and none of us probably celebrated the way that we usually do. But just like we've done with several holidays here in this past year, I think it shows that nothing can actually stop July the 4th from coming. Nothing can stop us from commemorating that day. Sure, we have to do it differently and maybe not with the same type of celebration we've done before. But we're reminded that no matter what, we should never take our freedoms that we have for granted, even as we have to sacrifice some of what we normally do for the greater good of this country and for our world. As I reflect this weekend, both as a person with a history degree, but also as a follower of Christ, I reflect on the freedoms that we have in this country and the freedoms that we also have through Christ. And it's important for us to remember that these freedoms also come with responsibilities. I was reminded of this last week as some of the natural criticism that comes, especially from what we're dealing with here, notably in our COVID struggle, but also as we have once again had to struggle with the issues of racism and the legacy that slavery has had and that race has continued to play in this nation. How our church has even been complicit in these struggles throughout the centuries is something that we cannot ignore, and we must continue to address so that we can emerge and be better than we were before. Even more so, we have to have the courage to be able to speak out and confront those sins of our past, to ask for forgiveness and to be reconciled, but also to call others to accountability and acknowledge their complicity in these past deeds. The reason that we're called to do this is from Jesus himself. But I think the Apostle Paul sums it up best in his first letter to the Corinthians when he opens it up by saying that there should be no divisions among us. And in that, what he means is that he is hearing from his people that there are some that are saying that they belong to, quote-unquote, others. I belong to Cephas, also known as Peter, or I belong to Apollos, or I belong to Paul. He finishes that sentence by saying this in a pointed fashion: I belong to Christ. When it comes to the rights of all human beings, we are called to speak out, and there should be no divisions among us. Belonging to Christ allows me to do no other, even though I myself have tried not to speak out. It can make us feel uncomfortable and even defensive. And then we try to reduce things down to what we are willing to say or unwilling to say, and just to not bother anybody because it might have the appearance of political partisanship. But in reality, we have no time for this. As Brother Richard Rohr has said, the church has no time for such silliness. The price is much too great. Pastor Mike Slaughter put it another way when he said, quite distinctly, I don't have time to play church. John Wesley wasn't playing either when the Methodist movement grew in order that he could spread holiness throughout the land. See, he saw those who needed to hear the good news of Christ and that it was for them also. And so he resorted to preaching to them even out in the fields when the churches barred him from preaching there because it made them uncomfortable. But his persistence and those of the movement continued to grow, and Methodism continued to spread, as it still does today in parts of the world. Wesley preached that there is no holiness but social holiness, no justice but social. He also believed that one must be engaged in the world for true holiness to take place, not to withdraw from it, but to engage it head on. We cannot be holy, holed up by ourselves. We must engage the world within. And we must do the same today. Now, as we have celebrated our freedom and remember the sacrifices that the founders of our nation made, men and women of all races, even as they struggled with the sins of slavery, we are reminded also that, as Dr. King said, that America is essentially a dream that we must continue to fulfill and to work toward a more perfect union. And we, as God's people called Methodists, are called to move on toward perfection. That means we must confront the ills of our society, and to do so not with anger or with hate, but with passion and commitment, to do so in love, that as we as the hands and feet of Christ do our part, we can become more perfect and holy and build God's kingdom, even as we even say in our Constitution that we seek to build a more perfect union. We cannot do any of this alone, nor can we do it by staying silent and relegating our faith to the politics of the world. We're called to bring God's justice, and we're called to bring God's peace. And as Paul reminds us, we're called to do it together, united as one in Christ. I look forward to leading you as your pastor in doing just that. So let's get about that work as we celebrate our freedom in this country so that we can make others free and to form a more perfect union. Let's continue to move on towards perfection in Christ. And as we do so, let's stay safe out there. Let's wear a mask, and let's speak out for the Black lives and all who are weary and heavy burdened, so that they might find rest in Christ. We'll see you next time. Have a great week.